Okay, so good afternoon and welcome to the introduction to C++. Oh, this slide is not mine. I already grabbed it on the internet. I don't have any time to create a PowerPoint presentation, but this is good for us. Really first to understand what is C++ and what is the language is all about. Okay, so credits to you Havan V for making this PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so let's start. And this is introduction to C++. Let me know if next slide now because it lags, it hangs on my screen. That is my problem when okay, I am now on online. I am now on slide number 8. That's wrong for a while. I have a problem when I have to record every time I record. It makes my laptop drag. I think there is a conflict with my Chrome and OBS. Okay, so the next one, okay, this is the history of C++. So if you know already this, no? So we'll relearn from it. So C++ is a multi-paradigm programming language that supports object-oriented programming created by Barjan Strostrap in 1983, okay, at Bell Labs. C++ is an extension of C programming, and the programs written in C language can run in C++ compiler. So it derives from C. So um, it is more siya, similar to C. I first with is C, and when going back in our first years when use a compiler is C, and I still remember those compiler where it is only a blue screen and a white text. It's very hard for us to write code because uh, it in our eyes is very ng sa mata because of the color combination. Out of it, we learn. Similar to C. So, development of C++ actually been for 4 years at least. So, it did not start with the name C++. So, first C with classes. So, naturally, C++ is created. That's why before we use always procedural programming, but again, you know the reason why we use OOP because of object-oriented or interface oriented really object. That's why we moved to OOP. So you know OOP is not really born 2000 bali born 1979. Wala pa ka nga tao ani, even me. So next, in the late part of 1983, C with class used for AT&T internal programming needs in C++ later in the same year, 93. Kisama na 1983. So all of you are millennials or Gen Z. Wala. Even me. Wala. Even me, wakuha na tao. Okay? So it incorporates a wide range of other application domains, notable graphics programming. So C++ inheritance through classes derivation. Dynamic binding is provided by virtual class function. So mostly, gamit ng C++ with a range of application. As I research most gaming development, even Mobile Legends, and also itong COD are product plus language. So that's nasa C++. Okay, so differentiate between C and C++. So C is a C is a procedural language, and C++ is non-procedural, so object-oriented language. Pero since ganina, we can also use C in C++ compiler. So that's why even though you are using the IDE Codex or anything, if you're using the normal C, it'll still work. So kung working with your programming C++, it's not really C++. Only C. That is the problem. Or you've been taught that that is C++, but that's really C++, that is C. Because if not by C++, you already was OOP. But since wala mo makabog OOP, all of those you learn is only C procedural language. Okay? Remember that uh, on C, top-down approach in programs. Top-down approach from top to bottom are reading the program. But in C++, in a purely C++, use bottom to approach. That is why when I give you example, first on the function. Diba? I told you na it is okay to place it anywhere, but in the compiler, we do not want dili siya pwede kay it is bottom. That is the reason why. And I really find it out karon na lang pod that if you're really working on code, it also work in C++. So really, I conclude that even though you are working with if statement, looping, and what's programming code, and sa gamit ka learn C++, really yours work is just learning C language, C++. Because if C++ ang gamit, bottom approach adapted in programming design. So meaning there is a direction at the bottom it can be also read. So di man to pwede last time. Nang we conclude that the things that we learned previously not C++ but C. So we have multi-declaration, global variable allowed. So in if global variables are not allowed. So I'll be discussing it to you later on. Also the what is that all about and so about this simple explanation about so I will there I want it very in it from. So uses of C++ language. C++ is used by programmers to develop computer software. So there are vast areas of software can do with mobile application, desktop application, or game development, or mobile or web-based application. So there are very various way platforms that we have to we use. All of those are the product of C++. Some of those, not all of those, but some of those. So it's to build drivers for various computer devices. You know what is drivers? Nakabalo mo sa drivers. Katong driver pwede ka put. Driver sabat niya ani is a software that really connects the hardware and the software. You know what is software, diba? The tangible part of our computer, and hardware is the tangible part when you touch it. So there is an between gap, a gap where a piece of gap where chess the hardware and software. That is what we call driver. The one that we communicate our mouse to your computer, our printer to our computer. Those are drivers. So a piece of software that communicates the hardware and software, and we call it drivers. And most common drive really build in the C++ language. So software for servers and softwares for specific applications are also used in and used in creation of games was creation of some of our old now. So okay, C++ is relatively low level and is a systems programming language. So relatively low level. So in ComSci, there are ComSci here, right? Na ano mo dire. So may subject ko na program languages no and you have to learn those paradigms. So there are class of programming languages. We have low level and not low level and not high level programming languages. And C++ is categorized in the low level language. So for IT, you don't know about that, you can explore it for your own sake. But really that means although siya sa computer. Remember, computer has binary language. So first is the fundamental in the binary language, followed by the assembly language. Then we have followed by the low level language. The more high level language that you were going, the more high level language, more AC write codes. That is why may na C++, hisod kayo, ang double shoot kayo. Yes, because that language is although a binary, called low level. You're writing codes like more dol sa binary language. Kasi high level lang para kag sa binisaya codes writing codes na wala ka kabalo nag-write day kag codes. That is high level programming language. And one good example for high level programming language is Python, where you can write codes really easily. Okay. So there are certain developers they are working really building programs, but really they are just dragging and dropping those applications. There's a high level programming language. They didn't know really ang programmer na binary, but it's 10 and 10. Remember that the programmer needs to understand the language of the computer. So that's why we have to create languages so that the computer can also communicate with our language. So that is called low-level language. So it's third community. Why we have very high that programming language or like has a large community? It is because if you have problems, you can have community. Programmers back then is very no wala sila unity wala sa una internet wala ba na that they can just if they have problems they will always solution to themselves. Right now, programmers, you don't need to do that one. There is community. You can go to Stack, you can go to any, and we will create our community. Everyone share anywhere, everyone learn C++, and those will help us to improve. Why? Because don't na problem in your programming, in your programming, you need to go to that community to ask questions. So say problema ni then someone help you. That is community help each other. And C++ is I call it a notable one of notable language there are now build community. So dang nabalog si plus plus mo tanang sa Facebook. Kasi problema ni because what you problem is not on is common to all that really first knowing programming. So ikaw lang ang nagproblema na. There are many una na nagproblema. And you give a lot of tons of options to provide because we have a lot of things, we have a lot of options to to we call it in our things that we how many ways skills can also here. There are many ways to solve them in programming. So if you give your problem me, so you also so it's clean din mo. So if you will learn a language has a language, you will learn more because of the people. So kamo as a student and so we can create a community for us for clean community and we will help and I will try to make one. For example, mga fourth year, motudlo sa first year regarding with that, it helps them also to connect with you that since you already one, they have also the knowledge of that this year. And that is my plan. Create community in order to for coding. So everyone, even though you are first year, if ask questions, what is the problem of this? So you'll be good. Ako lang, di ko na community of cheaters. Computers that you ask answers for those problems and anyone will get exact answer and on you to with but only to pass it to your instructor. That is a community is toxic because you allowed yourself to learn. Learn that is that you are here in school need to learn something. But now again that is because this is the stage of technology right now where you have the G and share all the answers that specific tabs. Now probably that is a tab in your side since you don't need not to kanang you don't need not to in much in those things. But in the end of the day, you are the ones creating your future. If you want to learn programming, do it from your own. Dili ko ng community of cheaters where anyone will help you to give you the exact codes. Learn from it. Learn from it. There is a question, and if there is a problem, you raise questions and don't entertain others. Maybe ka ganahan ni is to learn. And so students ayaw taga mo sugot na i-hijack inyong di ba if you are make if we will watch series of episode ng Korean with the Korean movies here or even Kima's movies may kuan dire fun alive
Here, chat.
so ano man di ba maglagot mo na ay ingon na amo mo ni nahitabo di ba spoiler maglagos one to watch on your excitement for like yung experience manod kay di kay lami kung you wanna know what happened next what is twist, right? Other people to answer problems, you yourself better on that, making yourself lazy. And the end of the day, you don't even understand what working with on it. So all you need to do is to I want to learn from your own. Na ang game to help communicate on the problem mo hang yan. So because a lot of us will done it perfectly. We will sugot sa dili all of us will have a defect in some part of areas in programming. So we need people to help us. That will guide us para people to answers. And so, dawat lang po ta, di wala ani may answers and all ang tayo reflect nimo. And you will try. Ang uban taga na giran, wala lang giran, submit diri ka instructor. Write your input. So what happened? At the end of the day, you would ask learn something. Truck sa naman na gisil do with me in our behalf. So kisa may makaluoy, during your time, makagawa mo and that na you will find a job, a good job, create good job na ang ganahang programmer become you will have good you are in a field na dili ka apply tungod kay you don't have that skill because during our class that is why some of my classmates some of us really not go into the actual IT and comsci we call it profession they'll go to some other jobs because they can I'm building literally them but because actually like for example hang programmer they cannot because they don't have skill some of us because they just so it's probably going to change your mindset also. I know this pandemic hits and but one day it'll be back to normal. And end of the day, whatever happens, you are the one who will mold your God by molding like as I said, how your professional na class only you. So going back, it already here at your start, modularity, the use of modules, touch modes, when we upgrade modes, some part of the program will not be affected. And also reading and readability. More use codes for us for writing code na sige tasog trabaho but we can use some of those depending of the program specification. Okay, so what's next? Are you still with me?
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now next slide is data is global. It is emphasized on instructions but not on data. So it can be generally heavy and careful. Data is global. Global data does not have secrets. So muna ito ang aton lang taon niya rapod. With advantage of C++. That is why natay mga disadvantages and advantages. Next slide. Okay. So with standard libraries. So all of you familiar with libraries, like input upstream strings are standard libraries. So the C++ standard library can be categorized in two parts. Now, a standard function library. This library consists of standalone functions that are not part of any class. The function library is inherited from C. That is why. So for example, if we need to out something in a library and we need to depend the input-output stream like for us to use the C out. If we input data on our program, we use in. But before we use C in, we have to include the Iostream library. And we have also the object-oriented class, which is a function, classes, and association function. So later on, we can then standard C++ library incorporates all of the standard C libraries with the small additions and challenge changes to support safety. So those are the standard libraries. So libraries are important in programming also, because programs are depending libraries. So this structure for C++, the first on the top, it is the header file declaration section. And we have the declaration section, which is already that. Okay, class section, so open siya. Then main function, and method definition. So those are things na part of it on our class. So you already familiar with. So that also remember that every program C++ there is a structure. Always figure it out what is those on that program. Header file, global declaration, is it a class declaration or it's a main function? Or it is a main function. All of those can be in one program. One. So so finish data types. Okay. Okay, so there are the data types in C++. So remember, primitive type, it only integer, float, char, and void. Those are the four primitive data types. Integer having value. Integer is on having negative value. And float has having decimal number. That's why it is named float. And character, no, series of character numbers. And void in value at all. And we have user-defined data type na tayo structure, na tayo union, na tayo class, na tayo enumeration. We have data type na array, na type function, function is a type, pointer, and reference. So all those things. So we go there na to. To variables. First, let me wrap this up. Before we go to variables, first, we will first go to start the program, and then code it. Okay? We will first go to the output of data in table. Let's click on it first. So question so far since I have to open code blocks. So for those um, asking some links about code blocks and we call it Eclipse for Java. I'll be posting it soon after this class. So after this class, after we will end at most likely 3:30 or 3:30 or 3 something. Okay with it? Is it okay with me? To me, because as long as you can write your codes there in that languages, for especially C++ and Java, I am okay with that. And at the day, we are here want to learn program. So those are the things that all we need to know where to type our codes. Okay, so in our code blocks, okay, first is you have to create a project before we can actually create a program. So I will create a console application. I'll choose C++, and I will create a project remedial, and all of those are will be saved on our remedial directory. I will use the GNOU C++ compiler. Okay, so I have here the main function. So can anyone can see it clearly in your phone?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so there are already bunch of syntax here that the RID is provided us. So we need to learn first all of those things, the structures. Remember what is the structure? This is what on the top. As long as there is a green line there or there is a hashtag there, that is what we call their the header files. Okay, the header files. This is the header files. And this is included also the global scope here. Okay, so we have here the global scope and this is the function, the main function. We can create classes at the top in here. We can create classes here or we can create methods definition here or function at the bottom. Okay, so that's it, no? So, but now we need to discuss first what is everything in here. Okay, so why we have include Iostream? Let me know. Andaya, can you explain to us why there is include Iostream there? Yun naman yung na-discuss sa una. Andaya,
Sir,
yes. Do you have any idea kaning sa I
wait, sir.
include Iostream? Or anyone here can explain line number one.
To answer, kaning, it includes the standard input or output function. This is necessary so that a program is capable of receiving and displaying data.
Okay, very good. By the book, by the book. Ang problema, without reading it, do you understand it? Anyone here? Okay.
Sir, that's right.
Okay. Ako sa Lem.
So we need to include the Iostream, sir, because it is the header file, and since it is a header file, so it contains all the functions of your program, like the cout and the cin, which means you're like it without the Iostream we can't make a program.
We can create a program without we can create a program even without Iostream. The only thing that really wants the uses of Iostream is only concerned about the input and output only. So
Ah, okay, sir.
there are programs that really don't have input and output, only processes. Pero seldom lang gid siya kaayo. It is not to all, but um pwede siya wala as long as there is no CN and Cout, because you cannot use Cout and CN if wala siya. Okay? That is the use of that line. So, about spacing, is it okay to have walay space? Okay, ano na this
Yes, sir.
spacer? Why do we have spaces? What is the use for spaces?
Para organize lang tawan, sir.
Okay, very good. It is organized. As humans, we need our codes organized for us to easily read these codes. Kita may nagama, kita may nag-code ani. So we want it na organize atong codes. We don't want, like, for me in my experience, I have a bad writing. So when I take down notes, I'll always know write it in fast evening lecture. So at that time I can even recognize my writings. But after 1 week when I revisit my writings, I don't even understand what it's all about because of my messy writing. So I don't want you write your codes without a breathing experience like that one, because you cannot really identify the spaces and asa siya dapitan apart. And it is also, if that is not really we call it um convenient na, because some of us can have 1000 lines of code, 500 lines of code, then we all of those are really close to each other, and probably we can have a breathing room dili ta ma-organize og tarong. How about tab? Is it okay na walay tab? Why we need to have tab also? Hello. Ano na ay tab na space? Nahilo man.
For indentation, sir, or indent,
Okay, why we need to indent?
para mabalaan siya po as sa part sa function, sir.
Yes, good. Asa siya na belong. So, we can also spaces and tab are one use is for the organization. We organize things. Okay, we can easily know that see out and return is inside of the left brace and right brace of the main function. By just looking it in here, we can really know that this is inside of the left. Okay? Pero, if you don't use spaces, probably that one is okay pa since wala pa may laing left brace and right brace. But if we will use, like, for example, if statement there, and if statement also a left brace and right brace. Now that is the time we don't know. Asa maning right brace dire para ba ni sa if statement or para ba ni sa main function. So if you don't want allow indention, we can't even know asa dapitan na siya, right? So as a programmer, maglisod ta. to identify that one. But that is why we have to indent so that inside of this part also will be included because there is a process we call nested. Not yung mga nested like another if here, another if, and this is what we call nested if statement. And this is not possible to our codes. But for indention of the use of indention, it makes us clear that this if statement is inside of this if statement, and this if statement is inside of our if statement, and this if statement are inside of the main function. By just looking it on our codes, us humans can identify it easily. Compare it of having one line of code or we don't have indention. Kung wala indention, sugot ra mo, ano mo gamag codes inani, kana this is the same thing. The compiler will also detect that one. The same coding lang na. But can you work on it?
Yagaw lang tawon, sir.
Yagaw. So the more yagaw po tong utok pag mag-program, yagaw po tong codes, what happened? Yagaw, tanan. Right? So that is the use for indention. Simple lang kayo siya, no? Indention tab to make you indent something but really helps you in your end as a programmer. So, simple na kayo siya. Pero wala na, it makes your life messy. Is it right? Simple lang kayo, no? Do you agree with it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. So, we practice always indention. We practice also spacing. What is good important of it? Practice those things. Simple things matter. Sa inana lang day by day spacing, indention, what is the meaning of it, what makes you beneficial of it. Imo na siyang i-internalize day by day, you will practice every step one at a time. Okay? Next, that is why we need spaces for us to elaborate that this one is not, this one that these two are not the group to each other. So meaning natay space for us to that is one is independent. The Iostream is not dependent for the using. So muna si pasabot lang nato ba na we may space because if we die space we can identify that that is a group. Since we space it meaning this one is not related to this one. Ano na to for us a programmer. Kaya sometimes when we put no space makaingon siguro kauban na silang duha. Especially if you are a beginner. Ay kauban na sila mo nang gigrupo na sila dira. Right? But if we space that means that two are not independent to each other. They are dependent. So here we have a keyword using and a keyword namespace and std, and we called it the naming standard the standard naming convention in C++, where we can use those things like cout, string, cin, even though we include it here or our library, but the our compiler doesn't know what is the language or what is the standard naming convention. So we set what is the standard because since it is a computer, it's very strict about standards because really it only understands bunch one of zero, one zero, ones and zero, which is the binary. Everything will be on the standard naming convention. So what is the variable? What are those reserved namespaces? Na yang malantaw for the program. So it is required all of the program has to use the using namespace std for the standard. STD means standard. Dili ni siya sexually transmitted disease, no? That is STD is standard. Okay, naming conventions. Namespace is the naming convention. Okay, wala man siya using, no? Using paggamit. So, here, everything in here is now, or everything on I highlighted is part of the main function. So every function is consists of three parts: the data type, the name, and the scope. Always remember that one. The data type, the name, with include with open close and parentheses. That is how we literally name a method or a function. And the scope. When you say scope, um, everything, every codes inside of the left brace and the right brace are the block of codes that will execute under the main function will be called. So we call it the scope. Because if you write here, see out here, that is not already on the scope or the main. On the scope sa main is only the left brace and the right brace. So whatever you write here outside the main function is not the scope of the main function. So always remember every function, because we will going to tackle it in on the next. So this one, this is a main function. So every main function has a data type, a name, and a scope. Some even, sa makabantay mo, there are some na naigibutang diri char, then ay mga something something lang. That is the parameter. And some, it depends how we use the main function. So right now, since we are just using it simpler one, we just use it with no parameter. So, kasi nakabantay ana yung mga something like, I'm not good familiar with those things. Ana yung mga char na naman to yung mga naana. I don't know really the symbol of it. Kasi nakabantay.
Katong char string
Katong
arguments
sa
eh.
phone, sir.
Sa phone. Like, ching,
Ako, sir.
okay. Sorry for that. So, na ay string, let's the same, char string man to. Or string ba to? Char string argument.
Friends. Char
Okay.
string da yung brackets eh. Argent.
Okay. Char string, and ana, that is ba? That I don't know. The I cannot memorize those things because it depends how we use the main function. Pwede na siya wala, pwede siya naa dira. It's not really uh, a big thing for us. Really learning programming. It depends how we use and how the compiler works also. So, nung naaman siya parameter dia or wala, it's still the same. It, di ba? Ito the program always run. Okay? So, now we have the C out. So, who among you here uh can know what is the name for this symbol? For 1 year naman magatrabaho.
Insertion operator. Insertion operator.
Yes, good. That is what we call insertion operator. So, what is the use for insertion operator, by the way? Kung sa may trabaho si insertion operator,
To command.
to command what is the output data. Diba? So we all know that the cout is to output data, and we use insertion operator to know what is the output data. It could be string, it could be char, it could be integer, it could be float or void, right? But this kind of data that we output is what we call string. As long as there is a double quotation, we can tell that that is a string. Okay, but we did not define it because this data is not stored in a variable. We just directly output it using the insertion operator, right? So we insert the data, so the insertion operator to output on the RCOut function. Why we need to use this one? ANDL. What is the used for ENDL.
To insert a new line of the output stream.
Yes, to insert the new line. So, can we just have no trouble if we don't want to put it there? Mooran ra siya.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Moran lang siya. Pero, what will happen?
Magsumpay-sumpay.
Yes, magsumpay ang whatever the next. Okay, for example, when we out here, see out, uh, hello, remedial. So, then we run it. So, we build and run. So, as you can see here, this is our output. Hello, world, hello, remedial. So, only one line because it only outputs whatever you have to output for the C out. So, it is only a string. You output a string. So, you output all a string. So, it will just give you what is your output. I-output lang nimo siya og one line. Even though you're using two C out, but you only output it in one line. So that is why if you want to output a one line, you use and L. Or if you don't want to make it the more insertion, you use backslash n. That is one good example of shortening your codes. Ni line new line siya. So there are some our favor with using this one to minimize the line of codes and also to control also the flow of the output. So there's the basic one which is the slash n which is the next line and we also slash t for new tab. But this is common for outputting data in console application. It can use it in C++, C, and Java. Those uh, shortcut commands. So we can also use slash t, and it will just uh, we call it you can use it how many times. Pwede lang siya. So what happened? Wala lagi siya ni kuan. Wala ni move ang L slash T.
Vice space, sir.
It is new tab. Make sure no since if you're using a computer, you always okay. There is no problem with the coding. It's a problem for the running your program. Sometimes always build and run. You don't rely for the run. So build and run. Okay, sometimes okay na yung program na i-run na ninyo. Especially if there is a changes on the structure. So always use build and run, not run. Okay, that is what we call compiling error. So di na siya syntax error. It is a compiling error. For compiling, probably you run it without even building it because if you change something a few lines, you need to use it building a restructure of the console because this one will be converted into binary. All of our codes are converted to binary, and it will output also from this language to binary and binary to the output. So what happened is if you just rely on run, then there are some changes here na wala take changes sa pag-compile. And for example, nakabantay mo, so always use this build and run to make sure that all your changes will be affected. Okay, so that's it, no? And then why we have return zero here? Is it because we use the data type integer, and every data type here that we use, integer, int, integer, float, strings, requires a return type. It requires a return value. Uh, Only the void not requires us to have a return value. So that is nature for us to have a return zero. So this is only here. It only why we need only here. We just comply what is needed on our data type int here. So pwede ra po na siya if we can use void main and we choose